In today's show, 7 burning questions for the Trailblazers heading into the 2024-2025 season. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you 3 days a week, all August long and into the first couple weeks of September. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. In today's show, we are talking 7 burning questions for the Portland Trailblazers. It is that time of year when we have more questions than answers, and I want to start with 2 sort of big picture overarching questions and then have some little smaller ones to end the program. But I've got 7 for you. Let us get into it. And let's start with the big one that I think is the overarching theme of kind of the whole offseason. And admittedly, this isn't really a question about the basketball team. This is more a question about the franchise in general. But when do the moves come? That's the first question that heading into the season, when do the moves come? It's not really if, it's when. And by when, I mean, you know, the Blazers are, I think they're in a position in which they have committed a great deal of organizational investment in 2 young guards in Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson. You take them back-to-back picks with in the top 7. Then you take a center in the top 7 in Donovan Clingan. And there isn't a clean roster path for all of those players to start together. You know, Donovan Clingan isn't ready to play 35 minutes a night. Scoot Henderson struggled mightily to begin his rookie season. Shaedon Sharpe has been, you know, he wasn't very good as a rookie. And he just didn't play much as a sophomore, but he's had some flashes of being very good. So it's like it's not like they are so good that you need to commit to them. And yet the team has, and Joe Crone himself, the GM, has said like they're going to do what they need to do to build around and maximize Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson. And when that is the stated goal of the franchise, it means that the players that are sort of blocking that start to be sort of questions about when they get moved. Very specifically for the guards, it's Anthony Simons. It's not really a numbers crunch. Like Ant and Shaedon and Scoot can all play and split the 96 minutes, and it's fine. But it is a little bit curious that, you know, there's no simple path for Scoot Henderson to play 33 minutes a night. There's like a cap on his minutes. That's a little bit odd. If he pops in year 2, it becomes a little bit strange. For the most part, to begin the season, it's not a problem. It's not a numbers problem. And Anthony Simons is a lot better than Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson right now. Like, he's a lot better than them. So I think that is another thing that just like needs to be said. It is, if we're talking about talent, Ant is a cut above those 2 and it's by a fairly wide margin. And yet the curious part of the Blazers whole situation is that it feels inevitable that Anthony Simons will get traded. It feels inevitable that Jeremy Grant, who's not really blocking anyone, but is like a little bit older and probably has some trade appeal out there on the market, will get traded as well. And after drafting Donovan Clingan, it seems more like when, not if, the Blazers will move on from DeAndre Ayton. Again, like, Clingan isn't ready to play big minutes, but Ayton has 2 years remaining on his contract. If you get to this time next year and Ayton's still on the roster, he's an expiring contract heading into the trade deadline. You're not going to get as much value for him as an expiring. It's a curious spot to be in. So my first question for the Blazers heading into the season is, when do these moves come? Do they come, you know, trades typically don't happen like, it's like, you get to the end of July, first couple weeks of August, and stuff kind of dies down. First week of August, stuff dies down. Typically, trades, and particularly minor trades, don't happen heading into training camp. And once teams get into training camp, they're usually somewhat reluctant to make moves, right? They've got their team, they're going to build forward, and then it's usually you wait until December. I think typically it's when the calendar flips. Mark Stein of the Stein Line always likes to point out that within 30 days of December 15th or once, whatever, because the season has been moved around due to COVID, but like within 30 days, within 1 month of all players being eligible to be traded, or most players being eligible to be traded, typically that's December 15th, but whatever that date has been over the years, there has been a move, he pointed out, and this OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam, whoever it might be, but typically it happens when the calendar flips and you get into January. But for me, it's when these deals happen. Do they happen in season? Do they happen right up against the deadline? Do they wait until the summertime to make these moves and play out the entire season? I don't think they're going to trade every single one of these gentlemen. It sort of hasn't been the Blazers' MO, and it's not all like extremely pressing, right? It's not like incredibly important that they trade Jeremy Grant, but it does seem like a move that needs to happen at some point. The way DeAndre Ayton will be an expiring contract next year, Anthony Simons will be as well. The Blazers are going to back themselves into a position where they either have to pay Simons and commit to him and continue with the sort of, I don't even know if it's a logjam, but like the confusion of the sort of who's the future of the guards, because Anthony Simons is young enough and talented enough to add to the confusion, right? Even if he's in year 7. So I think all of that is to say that one of the biggest questions for me is, when do these deals come? And the other question for me that is related to these trades, because obviously they could trade other players too. Rob Williams, Matisse Thybulle are on the list. When they make these trades, young players, like Chris Murray or Jabari Walker could be included. Ryan Rupert could be included in these deals. So it's not just like only they're going to trade these 3. It's also what they get back in return. When you're trading players that make a lot of money, 30 million, in the 30 million range for Ayton and Grant, and 25 million a year for Anthony Simons, you're going to have to take back players in return. Like almost every team in the league, by virtue of sort of the salary floor rules and also the apron rules, like most teams are going to have to send back other players in return, right? So the Blazers, it's like, what players do they take back? Are they prioritizing these sort of Denny Avdia types, where it's like, we want to get a player who's under team control, who's like a veteran with years left on his contract, who we think we can be part of the future? Or is it maybe more traditional rebuild trades, where it's like, we want to trade a player for a young player we're going to take a flyer on that might not be part of the future, a la Cam Reddish, and some draft picks, because we want to load up on draft picks. I think the Blazers' MO has sort of leaned in the direction more of Denny Avdia. Like they sent out picks in that Avdia trade, and I think they didn't choose in the Damian Lillard trade, and when they flipped Drew Holiday, they didn't prioritize expiring contracts. They prioritized, like getting back at DeAndre Ayton in the Dame trade. It's like a player under contract for a long time. Rob Williams and Malcolm Brogdon, players under contract for multiple seasons. So it's like they haven't prioritized expirings. They haven't necessarily prioritized like just draft picks over all else. They've seemingly wanted players under team control in order to have some either flexibility or at least like productivity from these players. They maybe haven't got all the productivity due to availability issues with Rob Williams and Brogdon, but like that's what they've prioritized. So for me, some of the questions surrounding the trades are when is the timing? I think in general, the Blazers front office has been maybe patient to a fault, or if you grade them another way, extremely patient and effective at it. I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B in terms of whether patience has paid off, in my humble opinion. But will they wait into the offseason to make moves? Will they play out this entire year? Or will they prioritize when the calendar flips to 2025 and we get into January 15th range? Will they say, okay, we're going to make a move. We've had an eye on these type of deals all year long, and we're going to execute it because we're going to pave the way for young players to play. And when they do make the trades, do they get guys back who are veterans, who need to be in the rotation, plan to be in the rotation? Do they get back young players that are like flyers that aren't going to play? Or do they get back some sort of obvious guys who are end of the bench type of players, and they just prioritize draft picks? When do the moves come, and what do they get? That is the biggest question for me heading into the season. I have another one that's more about basketball. The sport on the court that's pretty enjoyable for 82 games a year. Maybe not in recent vintages of the Blazers, but certainly often. I'm talking about shooting the ball, and I got a question all about that. Join me in that second segment, won't ya? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, there are a lot of ways to get therapy, and BetterHelp is one of the most convenient and one of the most flexible. It's one of and affordable. And moreover, therapy can be part of your daily routine. You might hear people say like never skip leg day or never skip your cardio. Well, how about never skip therapy day? Make it a part of your self-care routine, whether you're going through big things or small things. Therapy can be incredibly valuable just to add into your daily routine or your weekly routine or your monthly routine, just to make sure that you have, all of your bases covered, both physical and mental, when you're trying to better yourself or at least get the most out of what life offers you. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, I got more questions for you. 7 burning questions for the Portland Trail Blazers heading into the season. Here's question number 2. Who can shoot? Who can shoot? It's a simple one, but I think it's a big one that opens up a lot of the Blazers' challenges could be alleviated by better shooting. Last year, according to Clean the Glass, the Blazers were the worst three-point shooting team in the league. They hovered most of the season in that bottom range, but they finished, thanks to kind of a cold end to the season, 30th. They were 30th in effective field goal percentage. They were bottom 7 in the league in three-point frequency. They were, 23rd in the league in three-point frequency. That's bottom 7, but let me be more specific. Like, they didn't shoot a ton, and they didn't go in. They were, they're last in the league in effective field goal percentage because it's like they didn't take a ton of threes. They made the fewest threes in the league percentage wise. It makes everything harder, and not because you have to shoot threes, right? Like, I know the Celtics won the championship and they are a team that bombs away from 3 and takes 45 a night and has all these high level shooters. I'm not sure every team can be that, right? I'm not sure every team can emulate that. But every team in the league takes like 30 plus threes. But the real value of quality shooting is that it spreads the defense out. It demands defenders to play further away from the rim, and it leverages layups. That's what's changed in the three-point revolution, is that we have, or teams have started to, instead of, leveraging post-ups to get closer to the rim, they've leveraged three-point shooting and the threat of three-point shooting and the threat of space to get to the rim. Layups are still the most valuable shots in the league. It's just how we leverage those layups has changed. And the Blazers were a bad rim team because, in part, they just, like, the half-court offense was unimaginative and filled with bricks. But they had some moments when you saw guys who could shoot a little bit. Over his final 19 games of his season, Scoot Henderson shot 35% from 3. League average is like 36.5. He crept up over the final 19 games of his season closer to be a league average three-point shooter. He's basically a slightly below average three-point shooter. If he's a 35% three-point shooter for the entire year, he's a much different basketball player. On the season, which includes those final 19 games, Scoot shot 32.5% from 3. But in those first 43 games of his NBA career, just 31% from 3. When he looked better, part of it was the shots went in. He's always in his his brief NBA career so far, his first 62 games. It's like he's been a better off the dribble shooter than a spot up guy. So he's probably always going to be an on the ball type of effective player. But like, if he shoots better from 3, it opens up driving lanes. It makes the pick and roll harder to guard. You can't go under. So everything, like, it changes things. And Scoot isn't alone in this, like, flashes of three-point shooting. Over the first 31 games of his NBA career, Toumani Camara shot 29.4% from 3 on 2.7 attempts per game. He was bad from 3, and then he would kind of not want to shoot threes, and he'd drive into nowhere and commit charges or commit turnovers, and he started to do too much because the three-point shooting, the easy shots you can take, didn't come easy to him. And then he, loses a spot in the starting lineup, and then he kind of earns it back, and he starts to earn it back by shooting better from 3 and making things simple. And over his final 39 games, basically half the year, Toumani Camara on low volume, just 2.2 attempts per night, or per game, shot 37.9% from three. If that's the Toumani on slightly increased volume, like he was shooting 2.7 on bad accuracy, and then 2.2, it's basically half a shot a night on good accuracy. He's above average 3-point shooter. If he's an above average 3-point shooter and he can scale up, like, it would be a 50% increase, but like shoots 3 a night on 38% shooting, he's a different player, and he's a really helpful 3-and-D wing at that volume. If he can shoot, he can play a lot because he changes the game. Throw Deni Avdija in this mix too. Over his first 3 seasons in the NBA, Deni Avdija shot 31% from 3 on 3 attempts a night. Last season in 75 games, 37.4% on 3.1 attempts per night. Basically the exact same volume, except he started to hit threes. He's not a super high volume 3-point shooter. Like 3 a game is not super high volume. You're going to need to shoot like 6 to like really get teams to be like worried about you as a shooter. But Deni was money from the corners on 66 threes from the corners, according to Cleveland Glass. He shot 48%. Like he knocked them down, right? He made corner 3-pointers at a very high volume. Corner threes are catch and shoot shots. They're floor spacing shots. They're off ball shots. They're really valuable to help your teammates. And if Avdija is going to play a little bit off the ball, which he's going to have to just because of the nature of the beast, those are the shots he needs to knock down. When he's on the ball, that's a different thing, but he's going to have to play some there his versatility is that he can toggle between multiple things. And if he can toggle at a high level toggler, potential to be a very high level toggler, like that shooting is really going to matter. So if Scoot can shoot, if Toumani can shoot, heck, if Deni can shoot, heck, if Shaedon Sharpe can shoot, right? Throw him in the mix. His rookie season, 36% from 3. His sophomore season, his second campaign in the league, he played just 32 games, but he didn't shoot well from 3. 33% from 3 overall. He shot worse his second season. He was less effective. And you can call it injuries or whatever. It doesn't really matter to me, like health, whatever. The truth is that he didn't shoot very well in those games, all told, like if you take his season on the whole. If he's better, whether that's health or improvement or both, and the likelihood is that you hope it's both, whatever that looks like for Shaedon Sharpe, he's a career 35% 3-point shooter. If he's an above average 3-point shooter or right at league average on good volume, and he can leverage that off ball skills and step into threes off the dribble, he's a great cutter. He has a really nice mid range pull up. But if he adds to his 3-level scoring a very consistent 3-point shot, what a difference that would make. Then you can put lineups that can really shoot out there, right? If Scoot is like a slightly below league average shooter, and Toumani's an above average shooter, and Deni's an above average shooter, and Shaedon Sharpe's an above average shooter, I think you can book it on Anthony Simons continuing to be a very good 3-point shooter. He has some flaws in his game for sure, but shooting is not one of them. Jeremy Grant has settled in over the last few seasons into being a very good shooter. Like, then you could put lineups that can actually shoot on the court. And then if you could put lineups that can actually shoot on the court, you can do everything else easier. It gives DeAndre Ayton more space to operate in the mid-range. It gives drivers open lanes because you have more players that you need to respect. It allows you to be more effective in the half court and be more creative in how you attack, because you can leverage the concern of shooters off the ball to open things up on the ball. You can set those little ghost screens and people will actually care, as opposed to saying like, Shaedon Sharpe's running up for a ghost screen, he's going to flare out to the wing, I'm going to let him go, which so many teams did so often in the past. Scoot and Toumani and Deni and Shaedon, if those guys can really shoot it, your top 7 players that are going to regularly play are going to include lineups with mostly plus or close to plus shooters, and that is going to change the game. Who can shoot is a huge question. The chances that all of these gentlemen check the box is pretty low, right? Like, it'd be a heck of a season for selfish reasons. I hope it happens. But like, if it's Toumani or if it's Shaedon, how you leverage who becomes a reliable shooter and who becomes a feared shooter, because that's what we're really talking about here. It's who changes the way defenses guard you because they're worried about the shooting. How close do teams stay on the backside? If it's Toumani in the corner, or do you have to put Toumani in the strong side corner because they will just ignore him on the backside, which they did a bunch last season? Does the Deni Avdija shooting continue? And if it does continue, how much does that change the sort of geometry if the starting lineup includes Deni and Jeremy Grant, and all of a sudden you have like 2+ shooters on the court to begin games around Anthony Simons and whoever the other guard is? Let's assume that it's Shaedon Sharpe for now, I guess. So like, And I think you could throw some other guys in this mix too. Jabari Walker, Chris Murray, Matisse Thybulle to some extent because he had such a bad shooting 2024 after a hot shooting beginning of the season. I know some of you are probably screaming Donovan Clingan for me, and I don't want him to shoot threes, but that's fine if he does. And if he can shoot threes, it's a weapon. I just would rather him do... if he was going to try to get good at something, I'd rather him get good at being an elite offensive rebounder. If I had to pick something for Donovan Clingan to be good at on offense in year one. But like as the worst shooting team in the NBA last year, if you start to make them more, your frequency is just going to naturally go up because guys are going to have confidence, and your offense is just going to change what you are on offense, as opposed to one of the worst offenses in the league. And then they might still struggle, even if they shoot like marginally better, right? Like I'm not predicting that this changes the entire thing, but it does make everything easier. And having an environment where offense is easier and your young players are improving and things can get simpler and their decisions are simpler, incredibly valuable. So, who can shoot? That's my second question. I got 5 more questions. Join me in that third segment, won't ya? But first, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. And right now, FanDuel's making it fun. They're making it fun for you because they got something different cooking up. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers, new and returning customers to FanDuel, can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. It's pretty simple, right? Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. That's how it works. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. You can bet your $5 on whatever you're looking for. You got Major League Baseball, you got the WNBA. You got a whole bunch of other fun action. We're heading into college football. We're gonna have the NFL here in a couple weeks. We're 2 months away from the NBA season coming back, but you will be too late if you wait. You got to get in there by September 22nd. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get your free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. I gave you 2 questions in those first 2 segments. Let's hit you with 5 quick ones. These are a little bit faster ones. This is a big picture stuff, right? Like I think the shooting is a big thing, and I think obviously the trades is a thing that's on everyone's mind. It's like, when does the next transaction happen? Because the Blazers are still in the early stages of a rebuild. They haven't reached the stage where you can say it's not a rebuild anymore. It's more of a retool. It's like they're rebuilding. This is a team's rebuilding. And to rebuild, you have to continue to build. Here's some other questions, though. Will the Blazers play faster? Last year, they were 27th in transition frequency, according to Cleaning the Glass. They have athletes to play fast. They spent all of media day last year talking about wanting to play fast, and then they were one of the slowest teams in the league. They were bottom 3rd in the league in both transition frequency off steals and transition frequency off rebounds. Particularly off rebounds, they just didn't grab and go very much. Some of that might have been Scoot Henderson just kind of learning the league and his struggles. And then Anfernee Simons is not like a grab and go speedy. He's more of a Damian Lillard, right? He's more of a dribble, survey. And that's really where he's more comfortable. But I think the challenge of a coach is to instill your vision with the roster you have. In some ways, you want to maximize your players' gifts, right? So maybe it's not how to maximize Anfernee Simons' gifts, but when you do have Deni Avdija, who is a really good transition player, and Scoot Henderson, who in theory would benefit from playing in a less half-court basketball, and Jeremy Grant, who can run but maybe doesn't want to, Shaedon Sharpe, who is a good transition player, Toumani Camara, who is at least a guy who's capable of running in transition. How much will they run? I don't need them to be the #1 like pace team in the league, right? Like I don't think I think maybe that'd be a fun brand of basketball if nothing else, but like for me, this question isn't like, will they be one of the 5 fastest teams in the league in terms of like transition frequency? But will they be faster? Will they be an above average team in terms of transition frequency? Will they run more than the half of the league? Slightly above average in transition frequency. An increase from 27th when they said fast. We're going to play fast. Do they play fast this year? That's a big question for me. How fast are they capable of playing? And if you look at the Cleaning the Glass numbers, shout out to Ben Falk at Cleaning the Glass, but like when you look at the numbers, they weren't particularly efficient in transition, right? Like that wasn't places where it's like they were leaving money on the board because they weren't running, or leaving points on the board because they weren't running, right? That wasn't the problem. They were inefficient there, but they were also a very bad half court team. So it's like, if you have the personnel to run and you're also bad in the half court, who cares if you're somewhat inefficient in the full court? I mean, coaches don't want to see crazy turnovers, and they probably want to say, okay, let's at least try to have some organized basketball. But that's why I don't need them to be top 5 in transition frequency. Just run a little bit more because you have the personnel to do so. Will they play faster? That's my question. The other question I have is, how often do we see Anfernee Simons and Scoot Henderson together? I think it's pretty clear from year one of that pairing that it's just not a good duo. Scoot's always going to be small, right? Like, he's not small for a point guard, but he's point guard sized. He's always going to be one of the small players on the court. And Anfernee Simons is just not capable of being regularly he's maybe shooting guard skilled, but you want him guarding the smallest player on the court, or moreover, you just don't want him to not be the smallest player on the court, because you need to be able to make some decisions to hide him a little bit on defense. And if you have other players that are also small, and that's going to complicate things, I think it's pretty clear that playing Ant next to a point guard sized guard is really challenging for defenses. And Simons is, in year 7 and there's a chance he improves on defense, and I don't think it's for lack of effort. I think it's some physicality issues and some technique problems. Like, he's just not very skilled at it. It's not a natural, and he gets bullied a lot, like with some strength things. Players can get stronger, getting a little bit older, all of those things, but I think he's always going to be a negative defender, and the question is maybe how much of a negative defender. But Scoot was a pretty awful defensive player his rookie season. I think he has some tools to be an okay defender, but I'm not sure that he'll ever be a high-level defensive player given his overall size. There's a chance that he is, but I kind of think he'll be like Eric Bledsoe, where he has a reputation as a lockdown defender, but maybe the impact stats suggest that he's just okay on that end. But Scoot certainly is so young and such a lump of clay that he could be a very good defensive player. I guess I would just lean against it from the little bit that I saw his rookie season. But the Blazers roster demands that those two play together some. The first year was they got shredded in those minutes that those two shared the court together. And I don't think Scoot doesn't necessarily complement what Ant needs to be the best version of himself. They don't play their games don't necessarily complement one another. Players grow and improve, and there can be some familiarity and all of those things. And I think they have to play together, and they got to figure out what it looks like. And sometimes you just got to you have the roster you have, you got to wear the warts, right? Because you don't want to cover it up too much and just avoid it, because you want to figure out what it looks like. But I'm curious how much they play together, how much they really try that pairing, or do they really split those guys' minutes and say these are two pure point guards, or I don't know, every time it's obviously not a pure point guard, but we view these guys as ones, and so we're going to try not to play both ones together, and we're going to split their minutes and have them sub in for one another, and they'll play 4 minutes a night together and really avoid it. I'm curious, or do they lean into it? They say, some of it might just be health, it'll happen inevitably, but or do they lean into it and they say, we got to figure out what Ant and Scoot is, and if we get crushed in these minutes, so be it, because what we're trying to learn, this is a data collection year more than anything else. I'm curious how much that happens. And on that same note, question number 3 I have, I guess that would be question number 5 I have, is how often do they play a 3-guard lineup? How often do we see Shaedon Sharpe slide up to small forward and Scoot Henderson and Anfernee Simons play together? I hope we see it a fair amount. I think it's you can just say right now, it's probably not that effective. That for all the reasons that Ant and Scoot wouldn't be effective, adding another, Shaedon Sharpe's a pure small shooting guard size. And I think in his second season, maybe I don't think he showed the physicality to really guard up and play a bunch of small forward. Again, young, can get better, can get stronger, all of those things. But I think he looked like a very much a 2, a very much based on his sort of his skill set in year 2, very much he's very shooting guardy to me, which is not a problem on offense and not a problem on this roster unless you have to play Scoot and Ant together a bunch. But how often do they try the 3-guard pairing? They should look at it. I don't think they need to play 1,500 minutes with that trio on the court, but not trying it some and not looking at what it looks like and how you say okay, this is what this lineup can't do, right? This doesn't defend well, but what can they do well? Like, what is the absolute strengths of this lineup? And I think this is what it's like the sort of, you hope the coaching can kind of get there, is like, okay, this is what we believe this flawed pairing can do best. How often can we get them to do it, the thing they do best together out on the court? Like, that's the challenge of coaching. And I think how often that trio plays together. Speaking of weird lineups that I don't think will work, but they should try it, is the Twin Towers lineup. How often do Donovan Clingan and DeAndre Ayton share the floor? And you can throw another one in there, is like, this is I guess question B off of this is like, what do they do with Rob Williams? This is 7 and some change type of questions here. It's like, how often do Donovan Clingan and DeAndre Ayton play together? I don't think it's going to work. I think it's going to struggle. I think that duo is going to struggle on both ends, because I think Donovan Clingan is going to struggle as an offensive player in year one, and I don't think he's going to be enough of a good defensive player to cover up for having DeAndre Ayton try to play power forward. It's just not. It's like, I know DeAndre Ayton has some power forward-y type skills. I understand that when he was in college 8 years ago, that he played some power forward in a totally different league with different skills and everything, also like 8 years ago. But like, he's just not a 4 in the modern NBA. You can watch him play. Like, I know when people hit jump shots, you have your friends want them to play power forward, and maybe you are the friend who wants them to play power forward, but I don't think DeAndre Ayton can get away with it for any extended period of time. But how often do they try it? How often do they get funky? How often are the Blazers willing to experiment with their strange groupings that they have? I don't think you could do it a bunch. I think in certain lineups, it could work against certain opponents. And I hope they try it against those opponents, because I hope they try to figure stuff out. And I hope this year, as much as anything, that they are willing to experiment by being odd, and not odd because injuries or whatever have forced them to do it, but because they realize what they are. They're a team that is still far away from what they're going to be. So they might as well try out everything they have, and throw Rob Williams in this mix is sort of the B part of this question, is like, what do they do with Rob Williams? Is he healthy? And if he's healthy, where does he play? Does he play? Does he play next to Donovan Clingan off the bench? What does that look like? That's a weird Twin Towers lineup in itself. Does he play over Clingan some nights and Clingan picks up DNPs? That would be a weird decision. But, if Rob was healthy, pretty safe bet that he's better than Donovan Clingan, like early next season, and maybe all of next season, right? Because Rob Williams, has been a very good NBA player before, and Donovan Clingan is making the transition to the NBA, and typically rookies aren't very good. But the Blazers drafted Donovan Clingan to be part of the future. He should not be sitting and watching most nights. You wanted him to play at least some minutes. So what do they do? And how many Twin Towers looks do they have? And what does it all look like? That's a huge question for me. And finally, I think my last question is, who's this year's Toumani Camara? Who's the player that going into the season I have either no or low expectations for? And honestly, by the end of the first preseason game after watching Toumani Camara, I was like, I'm intrigued. I want to see him play more. Preseason game 1, right? And by heading into year 2, Toumani Camara is I don't know if he's part of the core or whatever, because I don't know what the Blazers core is, but I think he's one of the most intriguing young players on the roster in terms of what his impacts will be. I think maybe his ceiling is really good role player, right? But finding really good role players is part of a basketball team. Who is this season's Toumani Camara? Who is the guy? Is Ryan Rupert going to pop? Is Chris Murray going to pop? Is Jabari Walker going to pop? Guys who I have low or no expectations on them being really positive, players. Which one of those guys is going to surprise me? Is there someone else that I don't even know about? Delano Banton, does he take a massive step forward, right? Does Duop Reith does he come out and just, hair on fire, and I think he's bald, but head on fire, I guess. And he's just I have to play, right? And then it further complicates the whole center thing. Who is the guy I don't know? Do they trade for someone who ends up on the team? Who is this year's Toumani Camara? Someone who comes from general obscurity to feel like he has to be part of the plan every single night. That's going to do it. Those are my questions. 7 burning for the Blazers season. We do 3 days a week, all of August. We'll come back in the middle of September and jump back to 5 days a week. But for now, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It was a little weird publishing this week. It was Sunday, Tuesday, but we're back on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. There's just news I wanted to get to you that had happened late the prior week, and I wanted to bring it to you. But you're listening to Friday, August 23rd show. We'll have shows coming Monday, Wednesday, and Friday next week. Tell your friends about the program. Come back and join us for those shows. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.